Time for you to be asleep, Billy.
I'm not a bit sleepy.
You have to get up early tomorrow, remember?
Oh, I don't want to go to bed yet.
It's bedtime and sleep time. Now, put these things down. Now get under the covers and out with the lights.
Mom, I'm always awake for ages after the lights are out.
Oh, don't worry. You'll fall asleep right away. You'll be asleep before you know it. Good night, Billy.
Good night.
Billy's mother didn't know the real reason why he didn't want to go to bed. When he was left alone in the dark bedroom, Billy became frightened. He didn't understand about fear, that fear is a natural thing and nothing to be ashamed of, and that there's a way to go about getting over some fears. So he had never told his mother about it.
What is it, Billy? Why aren't you in bed? What's wrong, Billy? Is something the matter?
Mother.
Yes?
Is it all right if I leave the lights on just for tonight?
Oh, is that what's been bothering you?
I thought I saw someone in the room, and I heard noises.
Well, noises always seem louder at night, and then we often imagine all sorts of things that aren't true. Tell me, Billy, are you often afraid like this?
Lots of nights.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't tell me about this before. You should never be ashamed of telling me when you're afraid of something. Fear is nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody's afraid of something or other. It's very natural. Do you remember what happened a few weeks ago, that Sunday morning? I was making breakfast. You and Dad were waiting so you could get outside to work on the lawn. Do you remember how the bacon fat poured over the stove and caught fire? I was terribly frightened. Your father was frightened, too. Then he remembered an old trick about putting out grease fires, and he quickly smothered the flames. We were all frightened of the fire. It was natural. Being afraid was nature's way of warning us that the fire was dangerous and might harm us. That's what fear is, a warning of danger. Sometimes we're afraid of big things, and sometimes we're afraid of very little ones. But you shouldn't be ashamed of being afraid of something dangerous. No matter whether it's big or little, being afraid is nature's way of reminding us that we should do something to avoid the danger, and to avoid being harmed. Do you remember the time you threw the ball onto the ledge at school? Danny was angry at you for throwing the ball out of bounds and insisted that you get it down. He dared you to climb up the wall on the drain pipe, but it looked too dangerous to you, and you were afraid of losing your grip and falling. So you refused to climb up, even if it was a dare. And the janitor got the ball for you. You see, being afraid of climbing up the wall was your warning that it was very dangerous and that you might be hurt. You showed good common sense when you paid attention to that warning, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. Being afraid was nature's way of getting you to avoid something dangerous. But now there's something else about fear that I don't think you quite understand, Billy.
What's that?
Well, sometimes when you become afraid, there isn't anything that's really dangerous. Sometimes you think things are dangerous when they're not. Sometimes you and most other people grow afraid even when they know there's nothing dangerous. Can you think of anything like that, Billy?
I know. Kathy Lewis used to be afraid of dogs, even when they were friendly. She was so scared she'd cross the street when she saw one.
Well, that's a good example of exactly what I mean.
I found it out one day when I was playing with Scrappy. You know, Mr. Rogers' dog? He's friendly. He wouldn't even hurt a flea. I didn't know she was so fraidy, Cat. I called her to come over, but she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't come back even when I told her the dog wouldn't hurt her. She didn't have to be afraid of the dog. It wouldn't have hurt her. Isn't that what you mean, Mom?
That's just what I mean. And you remember how afraid Keith Hogan was about learning to swim?
That's right. He was scared to go near the water.
Yes. Keith was afraid of something that wouldn't hurt him, too. And there's another kind of being afraid when there's no real danger. That's being afraid of what people might think, especially your parents. Do you remember a few months ago when Mrs. Campbell phoned me after dinner? Frank hadn't been seen since school. They were waiting dinner for him, and poor Mrs. Campbell didn't know what to think. Well, you know what happened. They found Frank down in the basement. His report card had some bad grades on it, and he was afraid of what his mother and father would think, maybe even that they'd stop loving him. Of course, he found out that he shouldn't have been afraid, that his parents would go on loving him no matter what grades he made. So you can see what I mean when I say there was no real danger there. There are many things that people are afraid of when there's really no danger. Things like fear of being laughed at because their clothes are different or because their marks aren't as good as they might be. They're afraid for all sorts of foolish reasons.
But suppose you are afraid of something, like dogs or the dark. What can you do about it?
Well, each time you're afraid, try to understand whether there's really something to be afraid of. If you're afraid when there's real danger, you can learn ways of protecting yourself. Fear at the right time will make you careful. Fear and wise action, such as Dad took, or such as you took when you wouldn't climb up that wall, you can be proud, not ashamed of.
But how can you tell when there's a real danger or not?
Just stop and think. Common sense will often help. Then, too, try to remember or find out whether other people are afraid of the same things you are. For instance, Kathy could see that you were playing with the dog and that the dog didn't hurt you. She could know from that there was nothing to be afraid of.
That's right.
So what Kathy needed to do was to try to understand why she was afraid of dogs. Maybe just getting to know some dogs would have helped her get over her fears.
That's what she did do, Mom. Her dad bought her a little puppy to play with. It was the cutest little thing. We all loved it, especially Kathy. That was last summer. Her dog's big now. Kathy took good care of him. He got to know dogs so well that she isn't a bit afraid of them anymore. I guess that's what you mean by getting to know and understand the thing you're afraid of.
Yes. Keith got over his fear of the water by taking swimming lessons with a teacher he trusted and believed in.
Yeah, he can swim pretty well now.
There's another thing you can do to help yourself get over a fear when there's no real danger, and that's to talk about your fear with somebody.
Like we're doing now.
That's right. You could talk it over with your parents, friends, your teacher, your doctor, someone you're fond of and trust. If Frank had only talked with his mother and father about his fear that they might stop loving him if his report card wasn't good, it would have been better for them all. Of course, his parents didn't realize he felt that way. Perhaps they expected too much of Frank. And it may sound funny, but Frank's grades were bad partly because of his fear of his parents. He was afraid he couldn't make good. Talking it over certainly made a big difference to the Campbells. It helped all of them understand each other better. As they talked over his work and work habits and what they expected of him, Frank got over his fear of making poor grades and of not doing well enough to please his father and mother. He's doing much better in school now, isn't he?
Yeah. Gee, Mom, it does help a lot to talk things over.
Billy, would you like to talk about some of the things that you're afraid of? Like why you don't like the room dark?
Well, I'm lonesome. And I'm afraid you and Dad aren't downstairs. That maybe you've gone away.
You have my word that we'll never go away without telling you. And of course we'd never leave you alone. Either we or someone else will always be where you can call. How about it? Ready for sleep now?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, darling. Good night. What about the light, Billy?
Tell you what, Mom. Leave the door open a little instead, will you?
That's fair enough. Good night, son.
he will feel as alone as he did before? Do you think he'll stay awake as long as he used to? Does knowing that others are afraid of real dangers make it easier for Billy to stop worrying about his own fears? And when he remembers that some people are afraid when there's no real danger, does that make it easier for Billy to understand some of his own fears? Billy refused to climb the drain pipe because it looked dangerous. Yet at the same time, he had another fear. He was afraid he might be called a coward by his friends. He had to decide which was the real fear. Do you think he decided correctly? And do you think that the story of Frank's being afraid of what his parents might think helped Billy understand his own fears better? Did it help Billy to talk over his fears with his mother? What do you think?